Let us pray. Eternal Father, we gather here 80 years, 960 months, 29,221 days since Sunday, May 23, 1943, when the U.S. New Jersey BB 62 was commissioned. We thank you that you have been strong to save this battleship as she sailed in the waters of calm, served in the waters of conflict, and now sits in the waters of Camden. While this battleship has been thoughtfully composed, carefully crafted, and intentionally held together by massive amounts of metal, wood, and other elements, we know that the strength of the battleship has been every sailor and supporter who has courageously served on her decks. So on this day of commemoration in 2023, as we think about the 19 battle stars this vessel has earned, becoming the most decorated in U.S. Navy history, we thank you that you heard, answered, and exceeded the prayer of the chaplain who on that day of commissioning 80 years ago prayed that you would give those who served on this ship power equal to the task presented to them. We now humbly ask, as we come together on this occasion, that as we remember, reflect, and reminisce, that your presence will be with every speaker, participant, and observer in this place today, and even those who will view this ceremony in times to come. In your gracious name, amen.
Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you for those exceptional words as we remember what happened 80 years ago today. We have a very interesting program for you this morning, and to kick things off, I would like to introduce to you Colonel Ted Gallagher, U.S. Army retired. Colonel Gallagher is a member of the Board of Trustees for Battleship New Jersey and Memorial. He also is a valued team member of the Battleship's Military Affairs Committee. His military service included a tour of duty in Vietnam from 1969 to 1970 as a field artillery officer assigned to the Division Artillery. At the time, New Jersey was providing naval gunfire support offshore, and he experienced firsthand the sound and the fury of the incoming rounds, something he might touch upon in his remarks. Colonel Gallagher served a total of 28 years of active and reserve service in the U.S. Army. He has dedicated his career to public service and currently serves as Director for Camden County Office of Veterans Affairs. Please extend a warm welcome to Colonel Gallagher.
Thank you, Walt, for that kind introduction. I appreciate that very much. And you mentioned two things. We're talking about heroes, and I was just reflecting on what the chaplain just said. We are recognizing heroes with their likenesses on the banners down here on the promenade. And I was thinking that this ship itself is a hero, because what I am going to go ahead and say, sort of my concept of the hero, pretty much fits what the ship has done over so many, many years. Also, Walt said about Vietnam. Yes, I did serve in Vietnam. I served around Ben Hoa, Long Binh, Saigon, Swan Lock, a number of different places in Vietnam. And I was over there at the time that the battleship was, in fact, supporting our troops and supporting the cause. And you could really feel that the ground just shook when those particular rounds coming from these particular weapons up here, these guns, they will hit the ground just shook. So, good morning, everybody. What a great day to celebrate and honor some very important heroes with the dedication of these distinctive banners, which are along the promenade, plus the anniversary of the Battleship New Jersey's commissioning. Before I move on to my remarks, I would like to go ahead and take the opportunity to recognize some important people here in the audience. I see Melinda Kane. She's the commissioner for Camden County, New Jersey. Welcome to the Battleship, Commissioner Kane. And as my eyes look out, I don't see anybody else. If I do, I apologize for not recognizing you on this particular ship and this particular special occasion. So welcome to all our distinguished guests. So a little bit about the banners. In a booklet prepared for this occasion, and everybody has a copy of that particular booklet, you will find the biographies of all of those being honored today. You will also find a page which provides information on two local organizations which are integral to the success of this banners program. The two organizations are the Sheet Metal Workers Union, Local Union Number 19, and the PSCO, talk about that in a minute, group. Local Union Number 19 represents over 4,300 skilled and licensed workers throughout the tri-state area. And they sponsored this project to honor veterans in New Jersey, from New Jersey. And the PSCO group, better known as the Philadelphia Sign Company, has been branding America's businesses with quality signage since 1905 or 1905. That's a long, long time. It's 120 years. Both organizations are a mainstay to this geographical area, and for their commitment to the project, we say thank you. 3 years ago, the Military Advisory Committee, Walt had mentioned that, of the New Jersey's Board of Directors, or the MAC, as we are fondly referred to, was presented with a task. Tasks are very, very important to all of us, especially those of us in the military. We're focused on tasks. When they give us a mission, that's the task to go ahead and get completed. For that matter, there is a Navy Admiral. Many of you probably know him. His name is Admiral William McRaven, who wrote a book, his first book, as a matter of fact, titled Make Your Bed. And the first chapter is dedicated to completing a task, making your bed. Literally what his thought is you get up and make a bed and you're satisfied with that particular day. But you do other tasks during the course of the day. So our task was to identify at least 22 individuals a year over a period of years, individuals considered heroes in their service to our country. Once identified, their likenesses will be placed on the banners where they would be lifted, installed here on the promenade leading to the Battleship New Jersey. And we ask you to go down there sometime after the ceremony to go ahead and take a look at those particular banners. I think you'll find it very impressive. An easy task, you may think, but one with many challenges. When we, the MAC, met to start the process of selecting heroes to be recognized, we had to develop a criteria. And in looking at the multitude of heroes we had in the past and those we have in our midst, such as Rosella Johnson, right here, who served not on the battleship, but in the background as a Rosie the Riveter, we knew that we had a large task in front of us. We also found Wendy the Welder, who's also on the list. My concept idea of a hero is one who gives their all and do it not considering the consequences, but more importantly, considering the outcome. The Rosies and the Wendys did it because they wanted to ensure the outcome. The consequences were that their lives were completely disrupted, but their focus was on the outcome. The same is said for two Gold Star moms and their sons being recognized here today. Camden County Commissioner Melinda Kane, Mama Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jeremy Kane, a hero having served in Afghanistan and losing his life to a suicide bomber while saving the lives of his military brothers. And to Judy Tapper, past president of the Department of New Jersey American Gold Star Mothers, still involved, and mom of Navy SEAL Petty Officer First Class David Tapper, also given his life for his military brothers. Consequences to Melinda and Judy and other Gold Star moms here today and everywhere was the possible loss of their loved one, which did happen, but they sacrificed for the outcome, just as their sons did. There's May Brill, sitting right here in front of me, here among us, who in 1942 entered the U.S. military just like her two brothers, and then served in the Waves, or the Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. A little bit different than the WACS, which is the Women's Army Corps. I initially thought that Marie may have served in the Army. I later found out she was a Navy brat. So, congratulations. As a way, May ensured the goods and services were provided to the troops in the Pacific. The consequences of a disrupted life at that time to May and her brothers were far outweighed by the expected outcome, victory over Germany and Japan. And in more recent times, we have Captain Louis Levy and Vice Admiral Douglas Katz, both who served on the Battleship New Jersey during some turbulent times, and when they disregarded the consequences and focused on the outcome. You will hear more from them personally in a few minutes. All who served, whether it was here in the Battleship New Jersey, or the frozen hills of Korea, or the tropical jungles of Vietnam, perhaps the deserts of Iraq, or the mountains of Afghanistan, or over the expansive waters of the Pacific, and in the vast outreaches of space, we now have the Space Force, wherever, all who served today are heroes. So you can see the challenge that the MAC had to select 22 heroes in the first go-around the last time, and now 22 more for the second go-around, and then 22 for the final go-around in a few years. So we are here today to honor those we call heroes for the simple fact that they did what they were taught and swore to do, then committed their lives to do what is right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share these thoughts.
Thank you very much, Ted Gallagher. Ted is living proof that the Army-Navy team is alive and well on board the Battleship New Jersey. An event such as this doesn't happen overnight, and as Ted alluded to, there's a lot of hard work that went into this program, but we had tremendous support behind us, and I would like to acknowledge some of those folks right now. Our Board of Trustees are here, and if you are available to please stand so we could recognize you. I see Bob Del Sordo, Steve Sheehan, Leon, Terry, Joe, Pat Jones. Where's Lisa? Oh, there you are, Lisa. Greetings. I'm sorry if I can't see you, but I think I've named everybody that's here. Lawrence Morris, where are you? Ah, there you are, in the background. Lawrence. Lawrence, by the way, is a newcomer to the MAC, so welcome aboard. Where's Tom Riley? There you are, Tom. And Marshall. There you are. Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge the contributions to our color guard from Joint Base McGuire, Dix, and Lakehurst. They support us whenever we need them, and they do a fantastic job every year. Also, our battleship's bugler. New Jersey was the last battleship to have a designated bugler as part of ship's company during the Vietnam conflict from 68 to 69. Bertrand Trottier was the bugler at that time. He was also the last active duty bugler in the Navy. So when he retired, the rating badge went away. But we reconstituted it here on the battleship, so we actually have a bugler assigned to us. And Nan, she does fabulous work. Also works on the brass restoration team. So how about a nice round of applause for Nan? I mentioned the MAC, Ted Gallagher, Harry Levin, Phil Rowan, Jack Willard, Ryan Zismansky, our curator, and our new addition, Lawrence Morris. Thanks for all the help of putting this program together today. There's a special group here today from Cape Henlopen State Park, the Fort Miles Historic Restoration Association. And I know, Will Short, where are you? I know you're out there in the crowd somewhere. There you are, Will. Thanks for bringing your group of 31 up here today. And also, we need to acknowledge Dr. Gary Ray, who unfortunately passed away in February of 2022, who was the inspiration for your group's success and also for your presence here today. So Gary, if you're watching us, I'm sure you are, a well job. Thank you. This time I'm going to read off the names of the people that are in the program, and I would ask if you are personally here or if a family member is present to please stand or wave if you're not able to stand so we can acknowledge you. I would ask everyone to please hold their applause until after all the names are read. So in alphabetical order, Judith Barker, Richard Best, Ronald Bond, May Brill, Nelson Britton, Edith Claypole and her family, Peter Connor, Sam Corzin, Walter Dempsey, Captain Lewis Ivy. We'll hear from Captain in a few minutes. Eldon Johnson, Rosella Johnson, no relation. Belinda Kane for her son Jeremy. Vice Admiral Douglas Katz. Again, we'll hear from the Admiral in a few minutes. David McGuigan and his family. Welcome. Richard Milligan, Nicholas Minu, Admiral Paul Reason, Carlton Rowe, Admiral Raymond Spruance, Corby, Judith Tapper for her son David, and Charles Waters. Please extend them a nice round of applause. The program booklet, and I hope everybody has a copy, gives a lot more information about their service to our great country and why they are so honored today. So please take a moment when you have a chance to read that. Moving on with our program, at this time I'm going to invite our 2 World War II veterans to come forward and present a wreath. It's interesting that of the 22 names that we selected, 12 lost their lives while serving our country in time of war. So it's traditional that we honor their sacrifice by presenting a wreath. And since we have Bill Ryan here today, who served on the ship from 43 to 45, and Tom Riley. Tom attended Camden High School during World War II and served on merchant ships delivering critical supplies in both the Atlantic and the Pacific theaters. After the war, Tom attended what is now Rutgers University here in Camden and went on later to get his degree from Temple University. He served again in Korea, this time on an oiler, a fleet oiler, the USS Cimarron, and actually refueled the Battleship New Jersey and the other battleships that were supporting our ground troops ashore during the Korean conflict. So Tom, if you would please come forward with the assistance of a family member. And John Ryan, if you're here, I'm also going to have escort to the railing 2 of our Vietnam vets who served on board Battleship New Jersey during 68-69. Steve Sheehan, who was an engineman, and Ken Kirsch, who was a machinery repairman. If you would please come forward to assist with the wreath. At this time, I would please ask the guests to stand and remain standing for the playing of taps, preceded by the 5-inch gun salute. Get the pictures.
We remember.
Thank you very much. Please take your seats. Something about the playing of taps. It always gets to me. So we're switching from remembrance to a birthday celebration. Part two of our ceremony today, we recognize the significance of the historic event that occurred on 23 May 1943. One of the challenges for the MAC was to identify someone who served on the ship during each of the decades that she was in active commissioned service. And that task was anything but easy. But we had success, and our first guest speaker today is William Bill Ryan, who commenced service in the U.S. Navy in December of 1942, the month and year Battleship New Jersey was launched. Bill was eventually assigned to the Big J in November of 43 as a fire controlman in Turret 3, which is right over here. So Bill, this is your battle station. He joined the ship while she was undergoing shakedown cruises in the North Atlantic. For the remainder of the war, Bill served on the USS New Jersey, which was flagship to both Admiral Spruance as well as Admiral Halsey. After participating in post-war occupation of Japan Yokosuka Naval Base, he was honorably discharged from the active service March 1st, 1946. Bill, I dare say you are 99 years young. And God, you're with us today. What an honor it is to welcome Bill.
I got to say, it's an honor to be here. When the war broke out in 1941, I was 17 years old, and I was a senior in high school. Because my birthday follows in January, I turned 18. They couldn't draft 18, 19-year-old kids back at the first of the war. They drafted 20 to 36. And during the summer of 42, President Roosevelt said they needed more men. So Congress passed a law to draft the 18, 19-year-old fellas. Well, when I got my draft notice, I told my mother, I said, I'm going up and joining the Navy. So I went up to the post office, they sent me to Haverhill, they sent me to Boston. I finally got sworn in December 7th, 1942. They told me to go home, and they would call me up. On the 28th of January, I got called up, and we went up to Great Lakes. It was colder than the devil up there in 1943. So after 43, I went home on leave, and I came back, and I was sent down to Biloxi, Mississippi. I got it up. And I went to gunnery school. It was armed guard. It was a school for Navy personnel who were assigned to a merchant marine ship. We trained as 12 in a group. Then they took another 12, made 24. They shipped us to down south, and when we finally took a troop train to Savannah, Georgia, and got a Liberty ship, SS Robert Toombs. They loaded it up, and we headed for the Pacific Ocean, Panama Canal. We went to Australia, we went to India. India, we left the load in Karachi. Karachi, we went up to Madagascar. Madagascar, we picked up an English convoy to Cape Town. In Cape Town, we went across to Santos and picked up a half a load of coffee. Rio de Janeiro, we picked up the other half of coffee. And then we came home in American convoy. I came home and went home on leave, and when I came back, I got called up to the office of the deck, and they told me I was being transferred. I said, where? They said, Portland, Maine. Well, that's not too far from my home. I could take the train from home. Well, anyway, 82 of us were in the draft, and that night we got aboard the ship late, and the next morning they were looking for electricians, somebody with a trade. And then they finally come up with a fire control. Well, we didn't know what they were talking about, fire control. Because I was trained on the 4-inch 50, the for 5 inch, the 40 millimeter, the 20 millimeter, so then they asked somebody, how many had a high school diploma? Out of the 82, there was 3 of us. And I got put in the FM division, which, like he said, I served majority of time in Turret 3. That was my battle station. I did serve in the after plotting room, and I did serve up there in the highest part of the ship. I always tell people a story. One day we were going to general quarters, and I was climbing up the outside. Here comes a Japanese plane. He flew right over me, and I could see him just as plain as I see you people out there. But fortunately, he didn't do anything. Well, anyway, going back to the ship, we were, like I say, we were up there on the shakedown on the cold weather, because they just come up from the Caribbean. And we went from Portland, Maine to Boston. I got a 3-day pass to go home. And they never posted on the bulletin board where you were going. They always said we're changing berths. So we went from Boston down to Norfolk. We picked up the Iowa. And we went through the Panama Canal, and boy, was it a tight fit for New Jersey. We anchored, both ships anchored in Balboa on the Pacific side, and 2 days later we took off for the Mariana Islands. We picked up the fleet. In my task force, we had 2 battleships, 4 carriers. I don't remember the number of cruisers, and of course we had the destroyers on doing the duty for submarines. My first type I ran into was a typhoon. We ran into 2 typhoons out there in the Pacific Ocean. The first one, we lost 3 destroyers. Imagine 3 destroyers we lost. And they had a picket ship going around that night looking for them, because on your life jacket you had a light. And they were looking for survivors. I don't know how many they found, but so from there, the other typhoon wasn't as bad, but this ship took a beating. Turret 1 would be right under the water. We couldn't eat, we had to have sandwiches, and that was quite an experience. The next experience was at Gulf of Lady Gulf. We as a task force were supposed to protect the Gulf from the Japanese. Well, Bull Halsey got word that there was 3 carriers leaving Japan, because he was a gun-ho man. And off we went, the whole task force. Left the Lady Gulf unprotected except for a destroyer and some baby flat tops. And that destroyer got sunk eventually, and the captain got killed. They never found his body. But on the way up, we were going 25 knots up. But I'd like to go back to 1 step. I can remember that day, Halsey raised his battle flag, a big American flag he raised up in like the one that's up there now. And I said, off we went. And the old saying they were saying, Halsey, where are you, Halsey, where are you? And he finally got the word what was going on south. We turned around, whole task force, and came back down to Lady Gulf. And the Japs had gone. The Japs never tried to have a fight with us. So then another thing I remember, we didn't have separate toilets. We had a chute where the water ran all the time. And I was in the head, and I was in there by myself. All of a sudden, I heard this boom. I said, my God, we got hit by something. I jumped out, went outside, and here comes the destroyer going by us. The superstructures are all gone. It was a practice of the Navy when they were recovering planes at nighttime, they always had a destroyer fall in the carrier, but this guy made the wrong turn. Well, you can see the bow up here. We didn't do any damage to us, but they took that whole stuff. So I can remember that was floating right down by here, and that was one experience I had. And then we were supposed to be the ship that had the treaty signed on. But Harry Truman was president of the United States. The Missouri was out there in the Pacific. They'd only been in one battle, that was in Oklahoma, because it replaced us when we finally went back to the States for an overhaul. So they got the honor of signing the peace treaty, and they shipped us off to Manila. We were there for a few days. Then we ended up in Japan, Yokosuka, with a naval base. Now this base was never touched by bombs or nothing. It was still hell hollow. But you go up the river a little bit further, Yokohama, nothing was standing. You go up to Tokyo, and it was even worse. Plus the moat was still there where the emperor was. But it wasn't much. But I did 4 months of occupation duty on the New Jersey there. Once we sat in that bay so long, because we didn't have the sewage that we have back in the States. We all got dysentery from the ship sitting in the water so long. We went out to sea and gave it a little struck down. So, yeah. So I left in New Jersey January 1st, 1946 to go home to be discharged. I went home on a baby flat top. And because of sailors, Marines, all other servicemen. And we took the train across the country and ended up in Boston. And I got discharged January 28, 1946. Plus they tried to get me to stay in the Navy, but I said no. I did my duty. A little over 3 years. So that covers it pretty well. What I went through as a young fellow, 18 years old. So, thank you for listening to me, and God bless you.
What an incredible memory for somebody that's 99 years young. Greatest generation, and now we know why. Our next guest speaker is Captain Lewis Ivy, MD. Captain Ivy, the mic is yours, sir.
Sorry to take so long, but to follow someone like Bill here, who's 99, makes me feel pretty young. Of course, as a black man, that would be 110 years of age. To give you some perspective in terms of my life and my service on New Jersey, because everyone wants to know what was it like to be a black guy on an all-white ship. I was born in South Carolina, Spartanburg, in 1931. My father was a physician, my mother was a teacher, and I had 2 older siblings. Unfortunately, at age 3, my father was killed in an auto accident, and because he had served with valor in World War I as an officer, he was buried in Arlington Cemetery. So we moved to Washington, and that's where I grew up. I finished high school there, Dunbar High School, and then went on to Temple University as a scholarship student in pre-medicine. Now those were the years of the Korean War, and we had universal conscription. So any male over 18 was open game. Now the college students were told that if you maintain a certain academic average, you'd be safe to graduate. Well, I had several classmates who were drafted despite that fact. Maybe it was something having to do with this, I'm not sure. But to be safe, I decided that I would join the ROTC. But with all of my allergies and my dislike for sleeping on the ground, I was not going in the Army. So I said I'm going to try the Navy. Temple did not offer this as an option. And there were only 52 universities in the country, universities and colleges, that the Navy had authorized to offer this program. The program itself was comparable to the Naval Academy and was 4 years, so we had to study all the subjects that they did. I, of course, had already finished 3 semesters, so I transferred in my 4th semester to Penn State and enrolled in the program. They said I could do it if I could double up and catch up to what I had missed. So being a pre-med student, I had covered a lot of the material, math and physics and that sort of thing. So I said, fine, I'll try it. And the only new subject that I had not covered was astronomy. I had to take astronomy because back in the olden days, we didn't have GPS. So we had to navigate by using the stars. And we used the sextant and the table. And because it's kind of bad getting lost out in the middle of the ocean, you know, which way to go. So we were all trained in celestial navigation. We didn't have computers, so we used a slide rule. So we did it the hard way. So when I was in the Naval ROTC as a midshipman, we took summer cruises with the Naval Academy, and we served our time aboard ship. And as Bill mentioned, we lived with the crew, and of course there was no privacy in the John. We sat on this trough, and there's water slopping back and forth. So as a midshipman, we did everything the enlisted did. So we learned from the ground up. I served on 2 ships in the summer. One was a PCE, which is like a destroyer escort, a little bit smaller. And the other one was the USS Columbus, a heavy cruiser. And I experienced my share of seasickness. And I said, this is really not for me. So when I finished, in my last year as a midshipman, they gave us the option of selecting where we would like to go, not necessarily where we're going to go, but where you would like to go. So I selected the biggest thing I could find next to shore duty, which was a battleship. So, to my surprise, I was assigned to the New Jersey. And the New Jersey, as you have all seen, is a very large ship. It's roughly 3 football fields long, and the broadest point is at least 101 football field. So that's a pretty big ship. When I saw it at night, I was really amazed at the size of it. My mother drove me down from Washington, D.C. on the night that I was to report for duty, because at that time, the orders read before midnight, show up before midnight. So I got there after dark. We had driven around the city from Norfolk trying to find a hotel. But at that time, there was only one hotel in the city that catered to black folks, and that was McEachin, Bonnie McEachin. So my mother booked a room there and drove me to the ship, dropped me off, and she went back. I came aboard the ship at night, which was close to 12, and I was assigned by the duty officer to a stateroom on the 01 level. And it was dark and everybody was in bed except those on watch. So I went in, took my clothes off, dropped my bags on the floor. It was a 2-bedroom suite. Room. Double-decker bed. There was someone in the lower deck bed, so I just climbed in the top and went to bed, went to sleep. Next morning I woke up. I had the room all to myself. So I didn't know what happened, but I went down to breakfast and the officers ate in what we call the wardroom. The New Jersey at that time had roughly 2,002 or 3 crew members enlisted, and roughly 200 or 220 officers. And those that were not on duty ate at the same time in the wardroom. So I went down to breakfast, and they had everything segregated so that the ensigns, you're seated by date of rank. So the ensigns all sat together, and you work on up to the commanders. But the captain ate by himself, of course, but the executive officer ate with the rest of the officers. And when I sat down at the table, all the ensigns looked at me, and then they began to point. That's the guy who was in your room. I said, where'd he go? He moved out. Now, these fellows at my table were ensigns whom I had traveled as midshipmen with in most instances. So we were familiar with each other, and there was no hostility whatsoever. So anyhow, I looked over and I saw him, but we never had any verbal communication. I figured that I was sent there to do a job and not necessarily make friends. So that's what I set about doing. I was assigned to the B division, Baker division, the boilers. That's the main propulsion system of the ship. But we were in the North Atlantic at the time, and the ship got underway before I had checked into the boiler area, and they sent me to the crow's nest up in 011 in the North Atlantic in February. It was a little chilly up there, and I didn't have one of these outdoor coats. I just had my black bridge coat on, and I was frozen stiff almost. But anyhow, I was calling in shots from the 16-inch guns that night. Later, after that concluded, I went down to my division and met my people, and I had learned as a midshipman who really controls the Navy. It's the chief petty officer. So I decided I'm not going to go down and tell him what to do. He's learned a little bit more than I have over 10 years or so in this area. So I went down and I shook hands and I introduced myself and I said, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I'm here to help. And we got along famously the whole time I was there. From there, I moved to the operations department. I was in communications. I sent to the air control school. I did all these things. And I came back and I was the division officer for the communications division, which included the cryptography and all the secrets and stuff that were coming back and forth to the ship. As I was aboard ship, I had roommates. We as ensigns were put in an area at the rear of the ship on the 01 level. I'll pause just a second. So the ensigns in the military the flags are called the ensigns. And they have a space back there for the signal corpsmen to store their flags. But it's also the room where all of these midshipmen were assigned. And there were at least 6 of us in that one room. So our room was called the ensign locker. I had a roommate, and one of the fellows who was also an ensign as I was, and we got along famously after leaving that 6-room facility. I thought that the larger the ship, the safer I would be from seasickness, but unfortunately, when the ship rolls on a big ship like this, you think it might never stop. It just goes way, way over. But, oh, oops, sorry. Okay, yeah. So I had to put on a seatbelt in the bed because you don't want to fall out. I was on the top level. But I lasted there for about a year. Our captain at the time was John Atkinson. He was Naval Academy. And I had several duties in addition to my Charlie Division duty. We had the Navy at that time would take one of the professors from one of the 52 schools or universities that provided Naval ROTC on a summer cruise with the midshipmen. And this particular summer, my first summer at sea, they picked a professor from my school, Penn State, and his name was E.K. Wilkins. And I was assigned to be his chaperone, show him around, make sure he felt comfortable. So when he came aboard, we looked at each other. I didn't know him, he didn't know me. And we recognized the fact that we didn't know each other. And so I said, well, what school do you work in? He said, I'm the dean of DIR, which was the Division of Intermediate Registration. That was a school where all the students who were failing and were about to be dismissed would go through his school. And he looked at me and said, I thought I'd met all of you. What he called himself. I said, no, we unfortunately didn't meet. But he said, anytime you come back to Penn State, please come see me. I said, naturally, I will. From there, I was moved into a two-bedroom suite with a fellow by the name of Nishman, Robert Nishman. I'll tell you, I made more friends on that ship as in the New Jersey than I can ever recall. The New Jersey was like a big family, believe it or not. And of course, one of the advantages is that I met so many members who have been lifelong friends of mine. And the New Jersey is always foremost in my mind in terms of my experience as a young man just out of college. I will never forget or wish that I had not experienced. One thing I neglected to mention was when I was up in the crow's nest and cold and what have you in February, and I came down from the deck from that position after the quarters had been called off. An enlisted man came up to me and said, Mr. Ivy, there's a message for you in the communications. Would you go there? So I went, and he said, the phone call for you. And it was my mother. My mother called and said, why haven't you written? So I was really taken aback, man. I said, well, Mom, I've been doing a few things here. And it takes a while before I get your number. But I'm all right, everything's fine. But I'll never forget. Now, the other two situations that really come to mind as far as racial problems aboard ship was one time I got sick. I had stomachache. And I went to sick bay, and the doctor, whose name was Trapnell, from the University of Pennsylvania graduate, he said, well, I said, what's the matter? What was the trouble? He said, well, you had gastroenteritis. And not being a doctor, I didn't know what that was. I said, well, what is that? I said, well, you just haven't gotten accustomed to eating white man's food. So I said, okay. But I noticed that the black crew members on the ship were very proud of my presence. And they would come to me with various problems, and I attempted to solve as many as I could. So I will conclude here, but I could go on for at least another hour. But the ship is unbelievable, and it's something that I will never, ever forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Ivy. What an experience that must have been. Fortunately, we've come a long way since 1955. Our next speaker, Paul Stillwell, is an independent historian and retired naval officer who served on board BB-62 in 1969 as the Assistant Combat Information Center Officer. A tour of duty that was all too brief. Comments that I'm sure Paul will elaborate on when he is up here offering his remarks. Paul worked for 30 years at the U.S. Naval Institute as an oral historian and editor of the Naval History magazine. He is the author of or editor of 13 books, including 4 on battleships. His most recent book, Battleship Commander, a biography of Vice Admiral Willis A. Lee at USN, was the winner of the 2022 Rear Admiral Samuel Eliot Morrison Award for Naval Literature. Please extend a warm welcome to Paul Stillwell.
It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here. This is a great Navy Day. I like to think that the weather was exactly like this when the ship was commissioned 80 years ago today across the river. My wife will attest that New Jersey is a central figure in my life, but she knows so many things to advise me on, and there's a saying in the Navy, there's always 10% who don't get the word. I was in the 10% because obviously I did not wear one of the. I did not bring one of the many New Jersey caps that I have at home. I did not get the word that that was part of the uniform of the day, and most people did. I'd like to reflect on some of the other remarks earlier. The correct term is Navy Junior, whereas it's the Army Brats, just in case you have nomenclature problems. I echo what the chaplain said about the ship being much more than a collection of steel and wood and other ingredients. This ship has a heart and a soul, and those were bequeathed to her by the thousands of men who have been privileged to serve on board this ship. There's an old saying in the Navy, friends may come and go, but shipmates are forever. And I'm honored to see a couple of my shipmates earlier today. And I would reflect on the mention of Admiral McRaven. I have watched his speech, and if you haven't, you should Google it on your computer. He said, the way to get your day off to a good start is make your bed first thing in the morning, and inspired by that Admiral, this is what I do. I would like to give you a little background on how I got to the ship. For 2.5 years, I was overseas, ship homeported in the Western Pacific, USS Washoe County, named for the county that Reno is the county seat of in western Nevada. And we had a humorous slogan on board ship, Washoe County, we clean up Southeast Asia. Some years later, I told that to one of our sons, and he misinterpreted it slightly. He said he was talking to a Navy man, and the man said, well, what type of ship was your dad in? He said, well, it was a laundry ship. The man looked at him somewhat skeptically. But we were an amphibious ship. There were Marines on board. We operated as far north as the DMZ in South Vietnam and as far south as the Southern Peninsula. And, we were a mothership for swift boats and Coast Guard WPBs going up the rivers. And we saw some courageous men who had been shot up on those patrols and had to come back and get treated. After the time on board that small ship, I thought it would be neat to be on board the biggest, best ship in the Navy, the New Jersey. Seldom in life does one get exactly what one asks for. In this case, I was lucky beyond belief. I called my detailer from Yokosuka, Japan, and he said, "It looks like we've got a job for you on the wagon." Well, I knew immediately that was short for battle wagon. And that was the most enjoyable job I've ever had in the course of my life. Just a thrill to be on board, to know so many shipmates. I met Captain Ivy 40 years ago, and a treat to see him again today. Even though we were not on board at the same time, we're shipmates in a sense. I will report that when I got to the ship in May of 1969, she had just come back from Vietnam. There were commodes by then, I can report also. And the ship was in a stand down after Vietnam. We started off with half days of work and free passes to Disneyland, early liberty. And I hadn't been on board the ship in Vietnam, but I'd certainly been there, so I felt no guilt at all by going along with the program. We spent a couple of weeks off Southern California preparing the ship to go on her second deployment to Vietnam. We bombarded San Clemente Island, and if there's any kind of a record for an island that has been most bombarded by the Navy, it's between Culebra on the east coast and San Clemente on the west coast. Then we made a wonderful midshipman cruise. People pay to go on board these cruises. We were paid. We went into San Francisco, and there was a band playing, "There Will Be a Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight." One day we hosted visitors. 11,000 people stood in line for hours to board on the afterbrow, walk forward, admire the turrets, and walk off. And I was pinching myself, I get to do this every day. We went on to Puget Sound, Tacoma, Washington. Then we were out at Pearl Harbor for 10 days. Think of it, a free cruise to Pearl Harbor. As it happened, there was a young woman going to summer school there, and I had met her back in Long Beach, the home port. She showed up as soon as the ship did, and so she and I went out, saw the island, had a lot of good times. And every fourth day, I was so grateful for having the duty so I could rest up from the nights in between. We came on back. San Diego was the completion of the cruise. The ship steamed up to Long Beach, the home port, and we were ready. We were 2 weeks away from going to Vietnam. And then Captain Snyder, the most wonderful skipper I've ever had. He was a human being who cared for the crew. He would roam throughout the ship. They call it management by walking around now. He knew it instinctively. Tell the guys they're doing a good job. Let them know that you care. And he was that kind of a man. I once overheard an enlisted man say, "He's a cool head." And that was high praise. He came on the general announcing system one day in August and said, "I have some news from Washington. The ship is going to be mothballed and put out of commission rather than going to Vietnam as scheduled." And a pall fell upon the ship. There were unhappy faces everywhere. Frustration, disappointment, sadness that we had prepared for this mission and now we were not prepared to carry it out. There was a change of command shortly after there. Captain Robert Penniston came on board, and he had served in the New Jersey. It was the first ship he ever boarded. He was a midshipman at the Naval Academy. It was his first ship out of the academy after he graduated. He called her the big ship in my life, and his only duty was to put her out of commission. At the change of command, Captain Snyder said, "You've heard that war is hell, but war is also expensive, and the American people are no longer willing to pay the price of firepower for freedom," the ship's motto. At that point, In October, I talked to detailer and Bureau of Personnel. He said you have two choices at this point. You can stay at sea in another ship for 2 years, or you can go home because the Navy is getting rid of people as the ships go out. So I took number 2, went home to Missouri, flew back out to Bremerton for the decommissioning, and Captain Peniston made a touching farewell speech. He said, New Jersey, listen well, sleep well, and be ready to hear the call to come back, firepower for freedom. And indeed, she did in the 1980s. My luck held even more than that. After I got back to Missouri, I got a letter from a friend in Minneapolis. He said he'd met his neighbor in his apartment building, and she was a librarian at the University of Minnesota. He was a graduate student, and because of a bus strike in 1969, he was giving her rides to work at the university. So he wrote me a letter, said, she's in journalism, you're going into journalism, maybe you should meet. So I went 600 miles from Missouri, Minneapolis, in the dead of winter, and we've been married for 53 years now. I very much doubt that would have happened had the ship gone to Vietnam as scheduled. Thank you, Karen, for being such a wonderful partner.
Thank you, Paul. Our next distinguished speaker is Vice Admiral Douglas J. Katz, USN retired. Admiral Katz, his highly distinguished 32-year career in the Navy is illustrated again in our Honoring Our Heroes booklet. Following graduation from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1965, Admiral Katz spent the majority of his time in the Cruiser Destroyer Force, serving in numerous ships where he specialized in maintenance and training, weapons systems procurement, and tactical employment. Prior to his selection as a flag officer, he commanded Destroyer Deo and was the 18th of 19 captains to command Battleship New Jersey from 1987 to 1989. His last assignment before retiring as Vice Admiral was Commander, Naval Surface Force, U.S. Atlantic Fleet, where he spearheaded the effort to revitalize mine warfare, regional maintenance, and led the Navy's effort to bring smart ship technology to the fleet. Vice Admiral Katz retired from the Navy in August of 1997. He and his wife Sharon reside in Annapolis and have visited Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial more than any other commanding officer. So Admiral Katz, the honor is yours, sir.
Doesn't get any better than being on in jail. That's the way it was. Oops, no, not this. Sorry. That's the way it was then and still is. I'm here today, though, to simply say happy birthday, New Jersey. I know about this 80 thing. Been there, but it was such an honor to have the opportunity to be her commanding officer in the 80s. I remember watching her come out of mothballs in Philadelphia in 1967. I was a young lieutenant, and although I was proud to be on the commissioning crew of good old John Paul Jones, I could not help but wish I was going to the battleship even then. And oh, by the way, it was just next door. So I saw her every day that we were in overflow. But anyway, I was still proud to be on John Paul Jones, and I could not help but wish that maybe I could have gotten on New Jersey. Who would have thought? Who would have thought, to include me, that it would come true years later? I was humbled then and still today. Being aboard her was an experience of a lifetime, and I treasure those memories. Some of my uniforms are still on board today, enabling a part of me to always be here on this historic ship. How did I ever get so fortunate to have been chosen to command her and to have the fantastic crew we did. As we came out of overhaul, we did the impossible. It really was, we thought. To have a ship of her age and to pass an engineering inspection. But damn if we didn't do it. We passed. It was really well done. The crew was incredible, and I'll never forget their efforts to this day. They had the heart, they had the pride, they never gave up. Then we got a reward, going to Korea, Australia, the Olympics, and down under to help celebrate their bicentennial. We had the time of our lives. There was more beer in the fire rooms than I ever saw in my whole life. Shouldn't have been there, of course, but it's Australia. In any case, New Jersey is the crown jewel, and I couldn't be prouder of that presence down there and how well they did. And also the fact that this ship has decorations from World War II that have got to be revered around the world. I stand here today to simply say to all that have made her a superb museum, she is. Thank you for all you've done. The decks, the ship, incredibly, I won't say it looked better than when I was here, but it sure looks good. And she's earned another ribbon. I wish they could have done it there, but they haven't. For all that she did during that time. So once again, I'm extremely honored to simply say happy birthday, New Jersey. The older you get, the better you get. Not sure anyone could say that about me, but we're both over 80, and she just a year younger than I am. Of course, there's somebody here with 99 years. You might have just a touch more to feel. In any case, there are so many stories I could tell about my time, our 2 years aboard, my wife and I, and she was with me the whole way. But not today. One, because I would break down, almost did. But this is NJ's day, not mine. I will pass on one short closing story. When we were discussing leaving Long Beach, California, we'd been in overhaul for almost over a year, and the pilot was talking about how we were going to get it underway, and I came out and interrupted him. I said, well, why don't I just take it out, I'll twist off the pier, like I do with destroyers and all that kind of stuff. And the pilot interrupted me and said, sir, hey, I got to tell you something. You do that, after sitting in the mud all that time, you'll take the pier with you. Very expensive to replace that pier. I went, oh. Therefore, I said, okay, I'll do it your way. And we did, and the lesson I learned from that, I used going around the world, transiting in and out of ports all over the world. Thank you for this opportunity. We'll be back. Lord, happy birthday, and thank you all for coming and listening. Have a good day.
Oh, to command a battleship. For surface warfare, it's the pinnacle of your career. Our next speaker is Captain Mark Easton, which rounds out the last decade that the New Jersey was in commissioned service. From 1990 to 1991, Captain Easton reported on board the battleship and was destined to be the last supply officer for the USS New Jersey. He had the melancholy task of preparing Beak J for what was to be her final decommissioning ceremony in February of 1991. During his tour, she completed the final Western Pacific Westpac deployment, hosting the Fleet Commander's Change of Command ceremony on her return to homeport Long Beach, California. Following a distinguished 29-year career in the Navy Supply Corps, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Financial Operations and eventually Department of Defense Deputy Chief of Financial Officer until his retirement from federal service in December of 2020. Captain Easton currently resides, or serves rather, in a part-time capacity as a professor of financial management at the Defense Acquisition University in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Captain Easton.
Thanks, Walt, for that kind introduction, and welcome. I guess it's good afternoon now. I was going to say good morning. When I said, Walt, what do you expect me to do? And he goes, well, just remember the 3 B's: be bright, be brief, and be gone. So I'm going to try to follow those words. It's a distinct honor and a privilege. I'm actually humbled to share the stage with some previous shipmates and this is just tremendous. It's a tremendous honor. Thanks to all of you, previous crew members. The museum, New Jersey, the Battleship New Jersey, looks great. And as Admiral Katz said, it looks as good as I can remember. We took great pains when we decommissioned the ship in 1991 to make sure that we did it right. And I've gotten some positive feedback. And so it looks great. But thanks to all of the staff and crew, because this is just a great opportunity. Over my 29 years of uniformed service, it was sort of a brief time aboard the New Jersey, but the most memorable time, I think, in my career. Trish Tyler, who's here with me today, former Air Force background. We swapped sea stories. She wasn't with me that particular time, but she's heard all of the stories about New Jersey. So I wanted to share a few things. In other words, if you go to the website today, the Navy public website emphasizes honor, courage, and commitment, and those kinds of values are certainly embedded in the traditions of the Battleship New Jersey. I wanted to focus on 3 other things that, at least in my brief time aboard. The first is pride and professionalism. The crew that we served with, I couldn't tell you, when we would steam into it, whether it was overseas or here, in other words, we were ready to show off the show. It was with great pride, and that pride showed through, whether we were offering tours, as you continue to do today in distinguished tradition, or we were operating. In other words, the span of the New Jersey, and we've heard the many crews, have sort of transcended different technologies and weapon systems, from our 16-inch guns to when we brought aboard the Tomahawk. And on the last cruise, we carried 10 what we called remotely piloted vehicles. In those days, today we use those significantly to be able to extend our reach. In those days, we would launch those things and hopefully have them come back into what looked to me like a volleyball net and catch them on the way. But that's the kind of technology that we were able to do. So the New Jersey was able to be able to transcend technology and be ready for any number of things. The second is dedication to service. The hallmark of every afloat command, and I had the honor of doing 3 different ships, 2 of which are decommissioned and served in World War II. But the hallmark of every crew is being able to make every commitment, to make sure that we were ready to steam. We sat across the pier from the Missouri, and I think that was mentioned. I think Paul may have mentioned it before. We seem to be operating more than the Missouri, and so you get that friendly rivalry back and forth. During the time that we were aboard, one of the junior officers thought it'd be funny to take out an ad in the Long Beach Telegram, and said, used battleship, hardly ever been driven. So we caught a lot of flack, and the CO at the time basically had to counsel. We all loved it, but at the same had to go over and apologize to the wardroom of the Missouri. But that was indicative of the fact that we wanted to be there. Our last cruise, our Westpac cruise, we relieved the Midway, and we became the Surface Action Group. Participated in PAC-X 89, which was one of the largest exercises at the time. But that service was the dedication to service is something that continues to this day. The final thing is tradition. I give our skipper at the time, Captain Ron Tucker, and his XOs Bill Smith and Nate Beeson. Ron relieved Doug Katz in 1989. He received a turnover to say we want to be able to protect the traditions. And when I was listening to Captain Ivy talk about being at the tack end, he would make every ensign crawl to the top of the tack end to be able to put their initials. And so you had that rich tradition It transcended operationally as well. We were the first battleship to be able to fire our guns after that tragic experience on the USS Iowa, the accident. But the first battleship, and I still remember the pre-fire brief, where we had each of the gunner's mates go up and basically run through the paces. The environment, those three things, I think, are embedded in the traditions, the professionalism, and the pride that still exist aboard the New Jersey. I went and I was a part of the Comptroller of the Navy when we received the word on our way back that we had won the Cold War, and so this was going to be part of the peace dividend. And so we had the same sad news when we had to decommission the ship. We did it with pride. It stands today, and I just wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to say a few words. Thank you.
Our final speaker today is Rear Admiral Sam J. Cox, United States Navy retired, Director of Naval History and Heritage Command, and is the curator of the U.S. Navy. Admiral Cox graduated from Annapolis in 1980 and went on to serve in a number of progressively challenging assignments in the U.S. Naval intelligence community, both afloat and ashore. His final assignment as a flag officer before retiring in 2013 was dual-hatted. He was commander of the Office of Naval Intelligence and Director of the National Maritime Intelligence Integration Office, reporting directly to the Director of National Intelligence. Since 2014, Admiral Cox serves as Director of Naval History and Heritage Command. He's responsible for the U.S. Navy's official history programs, operational archives, Navy Department Library, the Navy's collection of historic artifacts, photographs, art, weapons, display aircraft, and for the underwater archaeology program. Admiral, it appears you may be busier now than you were while you were on active duty. Please extend a warm welcome to Admiral Cox, the curator of the U.S. Navy.
Being an intelligence officer in this job, I've only gotten one call in the middle of the night, and it was actually good news. The intel business is different. Hey, it's an incredible honor for me to be here, and I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to be here today for the birthday of this ship. A special welcome and gratitude to those who served both on this ship and elsewhere. I am actually on a mission from my wife, because when the Cold War was starting to thaw in 1989, two Soviet ships came to visit Norfolk, one of which was the cruiser Marshal Ustinov, which is the sister ship of the one the Ukrainians sank a few months ago. And we were in study clothes. My wife was active duty military, but we were invited aboard the ship. And it was like an Arab bazaar out there where the sailors were trading literally the shirts off their backs for anything American made. And my wife was wearing her USS New Jersey BB-62 ball cap that had been given to her by the XO of the ship. And over a dozen Soviet sailors tried to trade that away from her. I told her to hold out for the code books, but she gave it up for a Soviet officer's cap. And she's still disappointed that it is my New Jersey ball cap, so I have to go back with one or I'll be sleeping on the couch tonight. The last time I saw the New Jersey was in September of 1983, south of Cyprus, off of Lebanon, during the Lebanon crisis. And I was actually looking down at the ship because I was on the signal bridge of the aircraft carrier USS Eisenhower. There's not much that makes a battleship look small other than an aircraft carrier, but we were side by side doing an underway replenishment with a battleship, and that was so cool. And then the ship, the New Jersey, went behind us and took station in the plane guard off our quarter, starboard quarter, which is probably also something not seen very often, to have a battleship in that position. But besides the Lebanon crisis at the time, Marines had been killed by shelling ashore, and shortly after the New Jersey got there, some of our escort ships shelled Druze positions ashore in Lebanon that had been shelling our Marine positions. What a lot of people didn't know, because it was not really in the press at the time, was probably the closest that the United States and the Soviet Union ever came to nuclear warfare, besides the Cuban Missile Crisis, was in September, October of 1983. 1943. Like I say, it's not classified, but it didn't make the papers, but it was an extremely dangerous time. And the New Jersey was right out there in the midst of it, where we were surrounded by, outnumbered by, Soviet ships. But that power made a difference. And over the next couple of years, the maritime strategy that the Navy developed during the Reagan administration actually started during Carter, but came to fruition during the Reagan administration, were much more offensively minded, where the New Jersey went up, in at least one case, right up into the Soviets' backyard. And it was that offensive mentality that caused or contributed to the Soviet economy, which was a house of cards. But that offensive naval actions was one factor that resulted in that house of cards coming down and ending the Cold War. So the New Jersey played a part in ending what was actually an existential threat to the United States. I threw away my script because I got to come up with something to say that other people haven't already said. So let me go back to kind of the beginning here a little bit. If in November of 1942, the United States had lost 4 aircraft carriers. The Japanese had lost 4 aircraft carriers. We each had 1 aircraft carrier that was out of commission, heavily damaged, and both of us had 1 aircraft carrier left that were partially degraded. The Japanese because of losses of aircraft, the United States because of damage to the Enterprise. And the U.S. and Japan had basically beat each other senseless in multiple battles off this island in the middle of nowhere called Guadalcanal. A year later, at the end of 1943, the United States had 6 SS-class carriers, 7 Independence-class light carriers, 2 more battleships, including this one, and the Japanese had by that point built no more aircraft carriers and no more battleships. And the reason we were able to do that, what a lot of people don't realize, is that all those ships that came to fruition online in late 1943 had been authorized, funded, and almost all of them laid down, including this ship, before Pearl Harbor in anticipation of going to war. And had it not been for that foresight, it would have been 1945 before we would have had the capability to overwhelm the Japanese. One big difference about this ship from the pre-war ships, at Pearl Harbor, 7 December 1941, the Japanese after-action report by Vice Admiral Nagumo expressed astonishment at the intensity of American anti-aircraft fire and stated that it was so intense that the effect of surprise was negated after about 5 minutes. The problem was that weapons were not effective. Only 29 out of 350 Japanese aircraft were actually shot down, which sounds really, really one-sided. Another 111 Japanese aircraft were actually hit by anti-aircraft fire, but were not brought down. And so it's not the fact that the gunners weren't ready, it's because the weapons weren't ready. And 75% of the 5 rounds that were fired were duds because they weren't any good. And we haven't, due to budget cuts, we had not done much live fire training before the war. And so those dud rounds came as a real surprise. What made this ship different from those that had gone before is that you don't see it here, but it was carpeted with anti-aircraft weapons, new weapons that came online, after Pearl Harbor. You see that quad 40mm gun right there? There were 16 of those scattered around this ship, and probably 60 or so smaller 20mm guns that lined the rails. And the 5-inch gun that you heard fire had a secret weapon. We called it a burial time fuse, but it was actually a radar proximity fuse, so that the shell only had to get close to the enemy aircraft and it would explode. Didn't actually have to hit. I do have to say, for the New Jersey folks, we do have a really beautiful 20mm Oerlikon. I was going to put it in my front office because it was so cool, but my guys talked me into New Jersey needs one, and I see you don't have one, so it's coming up here to be along with these weapons, right here. And let me jump to the end of the war, where there was politics, of course, even in world wars. where New Jersey was at the surrender was actually under Admiral Spruance at the time, off of Okinawa, with a number of other ships. And the reason they were there was just in case the Japanese had some trick up their sleeve. So the ships that went into Tokyo Bay at the end of the war, we didn't want all of them or some of them or most of them to have something bad happen to them. But one thing that happened then was Admiral Nimitz, who's the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet at the time, issued a directive to the whole Navy that basically said that from this point on, naval officers will not disparage the Japanese. We will not be vindictive. We will not treat them like they treated everybody else. We will be magnanimous in victory. Those aren't his exact words, but that's essentially what he said. And by doing so, resulted in probably the biggest miracle of the whole war, of how we went from a vicious fight, no holds barred, no quarter, everyone, fight to the death, to having Japan being one of the best friends and allies that we've had over the last 70 or so years, and how fast that transition took place. And that's because we did not punish them, and this New Jersey was involved in providing help to Japanese civilians who, after that war ended, were starving, burned out, all of that, and we behaved as a civilized nation, and it makes all the difference in the world. So let me, one thing I forgot to mention, we'll talk about why did the Japanese resort to suicide attacks. One of the reasons was because of our aircraft and radar and the anti-aircraft capability on a ship like this, which would ride shotgun with the aircraft carriers to protect them. Any Japanese aircraft from about 1944 to the end of the war, if it encountered the U.S. fleet, had only about a 1 in 10 chance of surviving anyway. So if you're going to go out and you're going to die, probably you might as well go all the way, and that's what the Japanese did. So let me bring it up to now. Why study history? Well, history, from my view, helps explain why things are the way they are. And if you don't understand that, then you're just guessing as to how things are going to go, in the future. But I kind of look at history, and the mission of my command is there's a moral aspect to it and there's a practical aspect to it. And the moral aspect to it is that, if you expect sailors to fight and die for this country, the least we can do as a Navy and a nation is to remember them. And that's the primary focus of my mission as the director of the Naval History and Heritage Command. But there's also practical aspects to it as well. Let this helicopter go over. One, there's lessons learned. Lessons learned the hard way in many cases, through blood. That if you forget, you're doomed to repeat. I don't think that history repeats itself, other than people keep making the same dumb mistakes over and over again. But if you are willing to learn from history, it's great to learn from your own mistakes. It's even better to learn from the mistakes of others, in my view. Second thing on that, the practical aspects, is the ability to use the legacy of valor and sacrifice of those who have gone before in order to inspire those who serve today and those who serve in the future. So anytime sailors today think that, I've got it really hard or whatever, I have a picture over my desk of a kamikaze about to hit the U.S. aircraft. And anytime I start feeling sorry for myself or having a bad day, it's like, no, not really. Not what these gentlemen in World War II went through. Not what our guys in Vietnam, Korea went through. Things are tough now. It's, real combat in Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, it was dangerous for sure. But most of the time people, could be inspired by those who came before and know that they're living up to a legacy of honor that they should not sully. And then the last thing is that this is where you all come in. Everyone who's here today and everyone who has anything to do with the Battleship New Jersey or the rest of the Historic Naval Ships Association ships is contributing to the warfighting readiness of the United States today and in the future. You are, in fact, serving our country today. And why do I say that? As an intelligence officer, you know, I look out at the future and I go, I'm glad I'm not an intelligence officer anymore. It's really dangerous and getting worse. We may have done our victory lap too soon in the Cold War. Lots of things to worry about, lots of threats, you know, out there. And when you try to predict the future, one thing you're certain of is that you'll be wrong. So when I was on the thing called the CNO, Chief Naval Operations Strategic Studies Group, we were assigned a task of what should the Navy be like in 3033. And the way to do that is you develop different alternative futures and then analyze them to see, well, do you still need a Navy then? If you do, what kind? And we went through all these different scenarios, and it was like in every one of them, we as the United States needed a strong Navy. Now in some of those scenarios, one of which was pandemic, but some of those scenarios the nation couldn't afford a strong Navy, but there was no question that we needed one. And so part of my mission is to tell the Navy story to as many people as I can possibly reach. And everything that you all doing and this ship is doing is helping with my mission in order to do that. Because we're not going to have the Navy that the nation needs in the future if we don't have the support of the American people. You won't have the support of Congress to fund it if you don't have the support of the American people. So everything that you do to go out to help explain to the rest of the American public why they need a Navy, why they need a strong Navy, and why the Chinese are building one that's really big and really good, really fast. And there's not much time left for us to keep up. So with that, it's hot. People are tired, and I think I'll close it at that point. Again, thank you very much for everything and for you coming out and for your support of the U.S. Navy.
Thank you, Alan Cox. I've just been informed that Camden Mayor Vic Karstoffen is here today, and he has a presentation he would like to make. So, the Mayor, would you please?
Thank you. It's always an honor to be here today. This is one event, one celebration that I love staying to the end because so many great stories from so many great people. It's good to hear the history of those who have served and know their beginnings and how, you know, it's made them who they are today. You always say you got to know where you've been to know where you're at, and know your history to understand your present. So thank you all for enlightening everyone today, you know, your journey through service to our country, and those who have had that journey along the Battleship New Jersey. It's a day of reverence. This is a day of respect. Can't say enough about what the battleship means, not only historically, but to the great city of Camden, New Jersey. You know, your caring of just welcoming those onto this battleship and giving an incredible experience to families, not only just in the city, but the region is just outstanding. Your commitment to those who have served on this ship, your commitment to following and memory to those who have served on the ship is truly second to none. And the last thing that you do and you have done and you will continue to do is the consistency you've had, and not letting the memories of those who's been before us, those who served, not be forgotten. So thank you all for doing that. I come here, I don't want to talk too long, but I come here today because I have two proclamations, and one to an individual I've gotten to know the last few years in service in our community, in our county. I can't say enough about this woman and how she presents herself, how she leads, and how she gives to those to try to impact residents and community in a positive way. County Commissioner Melinda Kane, could you please come up? Listen, the Commissioner and I, we, you know, many times we're always at different events across the city, and she's an incredibly intelligent, smart woman, very witty. You know, I can always look to Commissioner Kane when I need something witty to keep me going when I may be dragging. But I want to have this proclamation of recognition of you today, honoring your son, and the banner that's going to be given up for him. and this is from the city of Camden. And this is the first one, Commissioner. We've been a part of a lot of these, but this is my first of the city to you, so this means a lot to me. In recognition of Camden County Commissioner Melinda Kane, whereas on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023, the Office of the Mayor in the City of Camden joined Camden County and the Battleship New Jersey in honoring Camden County Commissioner and Gold Star mother Melinda Kane in remembrance of her son's sacrifice and service to our nation. And whereas the Battleship New Jersey will honor local heroes with a ceremony to unveil 22 new banners which will feature veterans and military from the area. These individuals have uniquely distinguished themselves through their services to others and ultimate sacrifices to our nation. Whereas U.S. Marine Lieutenant Corporal Jeremy Kane, son of Melinda Kane, will be one of the local heroes honored this year. Jeremy Kane was killed on the line of duty January 23, 2010 while in Afghanistan. It is often said, Gold Star mothers have contributed their lives' work for the greater good. Soldiers' sons and daughters pay the ultimate price for our freedom. To honor the dead, we must honor the living. Gold Star families deserve our love, support, and respect. Now, therefore, I, Victor G. Karstarf, Mayor of the City of Camden, do hereby recognize and honor our great Camden County Commissioner, Melinda Kane, and our community and all across the City of Camden and Camden County. In this recognition of I have a proclamation for the 80th anniversary of the first commissioning of the USS New Jersey. I'm not going to read everything, but we're going to start from the top and get to the bottom. Whereas on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023, the Office of the Mayor in the City of Camden joined Camden County and the USS Battleship New Jersey in celebrating the 80th anniversary of the commissioning of the USS New Jersey and unveiling of the 2023 honoring of our local heroes. And whereas the battleship will unveil 22 new banners featuring the likeness of 22 local heroes from the state of New Jersey identified by the Battleship's Military Affairs Committee. These individuals have uniquely distinguished themselves through their service to others and ultimate sacrifice to our nation. Whereas we must all remember the service of our servicemen and women by renewing our national promise to fulfill our obligations to all who have sacrificed so much that we can live free. And now, therefore, I, Victor Karstarf, Mayor of the City of Camden, hereby stand with you on the USS Battleship New Jersey excuse me, in their continuous efforts to educate, inspire our community, encourage our citizens to honor the lives of the lost and the line of duty with appropriate ceremonies and activities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I accept this award on behalf of the Military Affairs Committee for the Battleship New Jersey. Thank you, guys. We have awards for all of our speakers, and presenting those awards today will be our two Vietnam vets from the Battleship New Jersey, circa 68, 69. So Ken and Steve, would you please come forward and distribute teak plaques? Phil, would you join them? Phil Walmsley actually created these plaques. It's a piece of teak deck from the ship's restoration program that were removed in 2022, 2023. Each is personalized with the individual's name and today's date, signifying the 80th anniversary of Battleship New Jersey's original commission in 23 May 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. How about a round of applause for all of our speakers today for their marvelous job. Thank you, man. We would now like to invite our CEO, Bill Rowan, to please come forward.
Well, I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon. I'm Phil Rowan, President and CEO of the Home Port Alliance for the USS New Jersey. We operate, maintain, and restore the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Technically, we're considered the ex-New Jersey. There is a New Jersey under the water now, I can't say where, but the submarine SSN 796 Virginia-class fast attack submarine, which I understand is the most lethal weapon in the world and will be the first purpose-built submarine for both men and women crew members. So it's a very important thing that we continue the legacy. We're the second Battleship New Jersey. It was the BB-16, which is a very great track record. And BB-62 picked up on that legacy, and I'm sure the new submarine will carry that motto, firepower for freedom, into the future. We also hope to have some of the silver, not from this ship, but from the governor's mansion, transferred to the new submarine. And that's another issue I'd like to discuss. But wow, this is so awe-inspiring to have all of these crew members and other officials who are here. I mean, I've been involved in this for 45 years in terms of economic development and running the battleship here for the last 12, but I've never seen a panel of this assembled here in my life. And we'll probably never be able to do this again. I mean, to have someone 99 years old here, we're losing virtually all of our World War II veterans, most of our Korean veterans, and Vietnam era veterans like myself. I mean, we're passing away. I turned 70 on Saturday. The ship is now 80. But it's really great to have you all here today. But the important thing to us is that we want to maintain the legacy here and maintain the ship here. It's really what it is, a museum and memorial, to conduct these kinds of events. This is her birthday, celebration of our first commissioning, but we host numerous events here from Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Independence Day fireworks, and we bring a lot of people out. But I think the important thing is that we're trying to educate people, particularly America's youth, about the importance of the military to our society. I mean, we have a lot of people who are influencers and involved in the arts and show business and rock and roll and all that. That's all great. But without a military to defend our shores, we don't have any of that. So we always want our young people to understand the people who went before them, whether it was the Continental Army at Valley Forge, up to our recent engagements in Iraq and Afghanistan, that there's been a lot of sacrifice made so you can be free. And we want to make sure we continue to do that. And I think the representations from the folks here today make this even clear. And Admiral Cox, I have a list of things here that are important to the Battleship New Jersey that the History and Heritage Command does still have of ours. There is a large medallion that goes on the outside of the ship, and it's somewhere in a warehouse in Richmond. There are other items that we have. We still implore the governor and his wife to help have the ship's presentation silver returned to the ship. So if you're here today and for today only, the big soup tureen plate and other tray are on display. Tomorrow we got to take them back to the governor's mansion. But we firmly believe that presentation silver should be back on this ship where it belongs. Another thing that we're doing, just an update, is that the Navy and Marine Corps have a long and proud history, and they were founded here in Philadelphia, in the historic district of Philadelphia, and the Marine Corps was founded in a bar in Philadelphia, the Tun Tavern, and I'm involved along with some other members here with Homecoming 250 to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States Navy and Marine Corps here in Philadelphia and here on the Delaware River. So some of the projects that we want to have a ship from every major naval engagement come up the Delaware River here, and we're working with the Navy, the Secretary, and the Commandant to have that happen. The New Jersey represents many of those wars, and the Olympias here. So we have these ex-ships here that will probably present that. But we're going to have a replica ship from the Revolutionary War, and we will also hopefully have the ship Niagara, the state ship of Pennsylvania, come down from Erie to come around and represent the state of Pennsylvania for the War of 1812. And the only naval engagement for the United States Navy, the Union Navy, that we don't have representation of is the Civil War. So we are investigating the possibility of building a full-scale replica of the USS Monitor, probably the most revolutionary vessel in the Navy's history. Really the beginning of turreted naval warfare. So it's like the Alpha and the Omega. The Monitor began, in the old days you turned your ship to the enemy. And Ericsson's design was, no, just turn the turret. You can follow your enemy. And that's what we have here today. So we have hopefully a representation of the beginning of the turreted warships, and the Iowa class are really the end of the turreted warship. And today's technology it's cyber warfare, and it's satellites, and it's drones and things like that, but these are basically the legacy of the big guns. And we want to continue that. The responsibilities of the Home Port Alliance, we have 25 members of the Board of Trustees, many of which are here today. They're unpaid. They work tirelessly to help preserve this ship and to get the money that we need. I used to say, another day, another 15K. It costs a lot of money to run this ship. Even during the pandemic, when we were ordered closed by the governor, I still had electric bills, still had gas bills, still had security and other things. And so it's important that we have a core of supporters out there, some smaller support, some major supporters. So we hope to continue to raise the money to complete the restoration of this deck. We purposefully started back here, the aft area of the ship, and we're going to finish on the forecastle, kind of the main entrance of the ship, because we knew that if we started there, we may not ever get the support to finish back here. So we're working our way forward, and we hope to have the teak deck fully replaced by the end of this calendar year. We've got a major commitment for this in the state of New Jersey for half the money. We just got to continue to raise more to complete the deck. We need about another $400,000, but who's counting? The other big project we have is to dry dock the ship. So when the ship was put away in 1991 in Bremerton, Washington, she was overhauled and the Navy put her in good shape, but that's been a while ago. So we need to find $10 million, check your cushions out there, to overhaul the ship right over here near where she was built at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. Bring her in, blast her down to bright metal, check all the sea chefs. They don't use paint anymore, it's coatings. Adding the 4 coatings to the ship and then bring her back. So we're hoping to get that done shortly, maybe as early as November or whenever we get the money on hand. But preserving the ship for another 30 years is very important to us. So with your support and support of others, we're hoping we're able to do that. We're able to do that. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming out. It is a birthday party. There will be cake available. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today. Thank you.
Still keeps the lights burning and the fuel coming, so he does a great job. We have 3 things left on our agenda. Chaplain will provide the benediction, followed by a rendition of God Bless America by Maria Descolia, which is basically the way the ceremony ended 80 years ago when Kate Smith sang God Bless America. So we thought it only appropriate that we follow that same tradition. And I'm not going to apologize for being over time, because I know we went way past what we thought we would need, but listening to these gentlemen, I don't know how we could have possibly made this program any shorter in actuality. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much. I should mention too that our chaplain, this is the 3rd time he's been on board in the last year, and every time he's been here, he's brought us great weather. So Chaplain Johnson, you're invited back many, many more times. Now please stand for the benediction and remain standing for the God Bless America rendition by Maria Descolia.
Let us pray. Almighty God, now as we depart, we ask for your continued blessing on the Battleship New Jersey as a visible monument of service and memorial to sacrifice. May we treasure the lessons learned from the lives of valor we have honored and the memories made here today to enable all of us to grow in wisdom and walk in light. And across the globe, continue to provide your guiding and protective presence to those who serve on the shore and on the sea with honor, courage, and commitment in your eternal, faithful name. Amen.
Right. America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Nick Smith couldn't have done it better.